Your your morning vodka, I see.
Yeah. Morning moonshine. Just
Sipping already?
get the day going. That's the way it works.
I love it. Yeah, who knows what I have in this water bottle?
It's also vodka. This podcast runs on vodka and moonshine.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
My name's Leo.
And Leo, we're back in the new year.
Yep, we're here.
2025, some might say.
New year, new us, or something.
Same stream, though.
Same, a lot of the same, actually, as it turns out.
Yeah. So today is a bonus live episode. We're going to be basically discussing Dune Prophecy Season 1 in its entirety, now that the whole show is over and we've had some space away from it because of holiday break. We're going to be interacting with our live chat here, and that's actually a good reminder for folks who aren't in the live chat right now. If you're listening to the audio of this after the fact, a reminder that we do live streams over on the Lore Party YouTube channel. We did them regularly for Dune Prophecy, and our hope in 2025 is to do them regularly.
Yeah.
Not quite the same every week cadence, but definitely sprinkle them out regularly throughout the months in 2025. So expect more streams from us and more opportunities for you, Gom Jabbar listener, to participate in our discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, today we're going to be recording our kind of State of the Imperium, Where Are We At episode, and that's going to go into a lot of maybe what you can expect from us this coming year. So I don't want to get ahead of us on that note.
That's right.
But turning the conversation to Dune Prophecy, Abu,
yeah,
how are you feeling about it? Like a month later.
Yeah, it has been.
You've had some time to kind of sit with it. And also,
yeah,
I think when we were last talking about it, half of our conversation was before we learned that season 2 was going to happen. And since we've been on mic, we haven't really had a chance to unpack what that means for not necessarily the immediate experience of watching the show, but maybe like how we think this is going to stand in the annals of history, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I mentioned this to you. We were chatting last week. We had a production meeting and stuff. And I mentioned to you last week that I don't feel any differently than where I was when we talked about episode 6 before the holidays. Mm-hmm. And I will say, you know, I didn't talk about Dune over the holidays. In fact, I made it a point to not think about work for 2 weeks and not think about podcasting and go nowhere near any Dune property. Which was just a self-care thing for me. You know, like I know myself and I know I'm a workaholic. And so I force myself to step away when I need to and spend time with family and friends. Thinking back on it now though, like I don't really feel any different. You know, I have said my piece on Dune Prophecy many times over the course of many hours of podcasting. And that has not changed in the subsequent weeks leading up to today. So ultimately, I'm still, the show wasn't for me. Ultimately, you know, I was disappointed by many things. There were highlights in particular moments. The agony scene in episode 2, Valia's confrontation with her uncle in episode 4. There were high peaks that I enjoyed, but as an overall package, the show did not work for me, and I had many criticisms about the storytelling. And that's kind of still where I fall about it.
Yeah.
But I know your feelings have evolved, and I'd love to hear those.
Yeah, a little bit, and I'll get more into it in a few minutes. But I think for me, for sure, the edge has gone from some of my disappointment, knowing that there is a season 2 going to happen at some point. Because now this isn't just you had one shot and this is what we got. This can be the kind of beginning of something a little bit more complete as a second season comes out. I still do think that a first season should stand on its own. And this one maybe is not the best, and for sure that's unfortunate. I also think that like in the last month, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about today, I've seen some really interesting analysis of some of the character arcs and some of the little details that I mostly missed the first time I watched the season. And I say the first time, the first 3 or 4 times we watched every episode as we were covering it. But I think I'm gonna enjoy at some point rewatching the season. The one concern I have is that the low points, like the Ixian weapons dealer and the club scenes, will just continue to be grating, will continue to be annoying, and will probably get more so each time. And that's unfortunate. But all in all, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, great show, super fun. What a great series. And I was like, really? Really? Your whole chest? You're saying it with your whole chest, huh? All right. I mean, sweet. I was like more the team show than you, but still had other people like loved it. So it'll be interesting for sure. And I think we both agree. It's good that now the creative team has like the cast locked down and the aesthetic locked down, and now they get to maybe cook a little bit more intentionally with a season
agreed.
2. And so I did bring some interesting points, but we might want to, do you want to take some questions first from our chat? Do you want to get right into that? What are you feeling?
Sure. Let's sprinkle in a couple of questions, and maybe they might weave in and out of some points, and we can kind of dip in and out, depending on how active folks are in the chat. First and foremost, I want to shout out Elaine from Nerd Cookies, who was here an hour early in the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if Elaine is still here, but Elaine had a question for us.
Yeah.
Elaine asks, what if Season 2 features a shadow war between the Sisterhood and the Tleilax? The hooded figure is a Bene Tleilax geneticist. We also get to explore what happened with the Theodosia.
That's a really interesting consideration. An hour ago, Elaine, thank you. And I have mixed feelings about that. I think it definitely clouds the cultural identity of the Tleilax as being really focused on biology and the ooey gooey stuff in the universe, to have them using thinking machines to experiment with people. I'm not familiar enough with Brian's books to know if that's like a major theme in them. Maybe the Tleilax who are more technologically oriented in Brian's stories. But I think within like Frank canon, I really feel like it's going to be an Ixian or something. Like it's going to be an Ixian, or it's going to be a Richizian, or it's going to be like some faction, some splinter faction that gets named. Sort of like in Sisterhood of Dune and Mentats of Dune, Ptolemy and Venport's like science people. Maybe it's going to be Venport, right? Like when we were talking to Alison Shapker, she was saying, we were asking, are we going to see the Mentats? Are we going to see the Spacing Guild? And she was saying the other schools, the other factions, they are there. We're just not looking at them in this season. So maybe that means we're going to see Venport and his like, he really has like a reactionary flip to the Butlerian fervor where he's going, no, technology and profit over everything. So maybe we're going to see that. But I do think that Theodosia is a question that needs more exploration, especially because she's now in captivity. I imagine we're going to get a lot more of her background and backstory for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you? What do you think?
I agree. I think we left the Theodosia thread dangling so that we can revisit it in an impactful way, hopefully in a future season, and I really hope we do. I think it's interesting what Elaine has proposed here for a Season 2 plotline. I do think I would be disappointed if Season 2 continued to dangle the carrot of a mystery figure behind the scenes, because at this point, Desmond is no longer our antagonist, so we need something, another goal or mystery or force for Valia to be working against on Arrakis, some sort of operative. And even if it's a middleman for the true evil behind the scenes or something, we need to establish some sort of antagonist. So maybe the Tleilax who are behind it all. I do wonder what the thinking machine relationship, same as Julio, I wonder what the relationship is. Like when I think thinking machine and people who are breaking Butlerian jihad code, I think Ixian.
Right.
When I think gross biological experiments and immoral, questionable morals, I think Tleilax. Both were introduced in this series, and I think both are viable options as Season 2 antagonists. I'm curious which way the show will take it, though.
Yeah, and again, I think Brian really leans into House Rachis and how they inhabit the universe. So I also wouldn't be surprised if there was like another faction that we're introduced to is another possibility. Also, Elaine
That's
says,
true.
"Yeah, I'm still here."
Yeah, glad you're still
Elaine,
here.
great to see you.
Yes. Everyone watching, please check out Elaine's channel, Nerd Cookies. She covers a lot of sci-fi, covers a lot of Dune. So if you like our content, you will definitely like hers. And she's a friend of the pod. We've had her on many times.
1000%.
Some good follow-up comments here that are maybe worth shouting out.
Yeah.
Omni Collective says, in response to Elaine's question, maybe they, as in the Tleilaxu, maybe the Tleilaxu would use thinking machines as a crutch before they go fully genetic, because there would still be people who would use technology even after the jihad as a cling to the old ways because of habits.
Could see that. Yeah. And ultimately, like, because Frank Herbert left the early Tleilaxu history so blank, because he really didn't give us a lot of like prime canon about their early years, we have a little bit of the Dune Encyclopedia, but even then, there is a big space within which you could say, yeah, they dabbled in technology before they realized, oh, this is going to get us in trouble. This is going to draw unwanted attention to us. Let's just abandon that fully and let's focus on biology, because that people will let us mess with. That's possible, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the 10,000 year buffer
Yeah.
between the present timeline of Dune in the Villeneuve films and this prequel show gives you a lot of leeway to kind of do something like that, where you're like, well, it's not the Tleilaxu you come to know because we're 10,000 years ago. They're different. They will evolve over the next 10,000 years. So I think they have a lot of leeway to do that. And I would love for the show to, in future seasons, kind of lean into the 10,000 year gap more.
Sure.
And give itself space to not feel so tied to Dune lore as it exists in the movies or books, and kind of tell the most impactful story that it can in its universe, versus being so chained to the wider Dune canon.
Yeah. Well, again, like, I think that's one of our big takeaways from this season was you really need to double down on like the most human elements of the story. And that's going to be why we enjoy the show. And especially in retrospect, like the Valia Tula stuff continues to be just the best. I was seeing comments online of people talking about that moment where Tula uses the voice to stop Valia in episode 6. And that moment
Powerful
that
stuff.
Valia realizes that Tula lied about Desmond.
Has been lying for years.
To protect her child from Valia, despite their sisterhood and their closeness, to say, I lied to you for decades because I don't trust you and I think that you're dangerous to this person. And like that moment had such emotional weight and was excellent and was so much better than the club.
Yeah. The show was at its best when we were focusing on Valia and Tula.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, do you want to, before we get to another question, do you want to get to one of your...
I do want to touch quickly on Omni
points?
Collective's creativity comment. Tleilaxu and Ixians could have been more together, beginning separated and isolated later on. Could that be possible, that they were closer to... I think that is something that stretches Frank's canon pretty taut, because according to what we learn in Heretics of Dune, the Tleilaxu are their own thing, basically from the beginning. And we're never like a splinter cell of the the Ixians or vice versa. They were always separate. Now again, Brian's books, you have like Tleilaxu masters taking over planet Ix and planet Rachis, and they're slavers and all sorts of weird stuff. But like according to Frank lore, I think that's a bit of a stretch. But
I agree.
We'll see. Again, there's a lot of flexibility within 10,000 years. Now, something that I did wanted to bring. I thought there was a really interesting point that it might have been Jordan who brought it up in one of the official podcast episodes, but it was this idea of in blood truth, the idea of family and kind of the burden you carry. And we see that a lot in the series. We see that everyone, right? Tula and Ori are struggling to understand like how their Atreides and Harkonnen lineage affects the love that they have for each other. We see that in a lot of different ways. But on a very broad scale, something that I hadn't put together until I heard this comment was that Lila as the descendant of Dorothea and also Raquella, was intentionally separated from her knowledge of her heritage, as was Desmond. Desmond was also separated from his, Harkonnen upbringing, and his Harkonnen, his involvement with the Sisterhood wasn't necessarily something that was actively part of his life. And yet, both of them are, through fate and the twists and turns, dragged back into those feuds that define their predecessors, which I thought was really interesting. This idea of like, can you escape by obfuscating where you come from? Can you escape those lines of fate? And on one level, my initial take was very like, wow, that's bleak, deterministic. It's like, is that what we're taking away from this series? Like,
yeah.
Are you just destined to fall back into the blood feuds that defined your family before you? But I also realized both of them are dragged back into the battle by Sisterhood meddling, by the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood pulling strings and becoming this formidable force. There's this idea that the more they step into the light, the more they will have enemies. And that is also what draws Desmond back. And that's also what probably drew the person who's manipulating Desmond the whole time to do what he did. And also what led them to have to use the Lila Raquella gambit of like, let's awaken her other memories, even though her fucking grandma is Dorothea, who was murdered. Like, hopefully that won't go awry, So anyway, I thought that was interesting, this idea of like blood and family. And we see a lot of that explicitly on the screen, but then there is this kind of background Shakespearean drama going on where people who belong to the two families or whatever were removed from them and then tumbled back into them, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I would also argue, in addition to Sisterhood meddling and that the gravity of the Sisterhood pulling them back in, they are also responsible for their own choices.
True.
Desmond didn't have to come back to the palace and start meddling and have this vendetta against sisters, but he chooses to do that, to some extent.
Yeah.
And Dorothea also, or at least Abomination Dorothea, chooses to come back in this bold, vindictive fashion instead of letting it go. So I think there's also a factor where they are responsible for their choices to some extent as well. Like to Ori's credit, he was like, we can leave this feud behind. We have the choice now to not fall back into the status quo of the feuds, of the drama, of the whatever. And obviously Tula didn't make that choice. So I think there's also, there's an active participation in returning to that family, even if you were ripped away from it without a choice. You make the choice to come back to some extent.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair point, because I think that idea of examining agency is also a big part of the themes of the story and the themes of Dune. And that moment that Avila kind of scolds the acolytes for going, why would Lila decide to undergo the agony? Why would you force her to do this? And she's like, no. She chose to do this of her own accord. Now, again, Tula manipulated her maybe a little bit, but still. And I would also say Desmond, I don't know how much Desmond is making clear, conscious decisions, given now what we know about like the traumatic surgery, his eyeball, the like, what he interpreted this as like God and his like holy mission because of the trauma? Is that like a false memory? Like, what's going on with Desmond? But you're absolutely right. Like, there is like personal agency, and that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Good call.
We have two questions here that kind of go hand in hand from the comments that I want to throw up. First is from Alphonse. Alphonse says, loved the focus on the Harkonnens from a not pure evil perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Wish we could have gotten a little more on how Atreides viewed them than what we got, but 6 episodes was way too short for that.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think that we have a new perspective on House Harkonnen, which is great. And I think we've agreed that like, what a great way to launch a TV series and to say, welcome to Dune. Here's our main character, a Harkonnen. Lovely. Great. Very, very smart. The thing is, how the Atreides view House Harkonnen is something I just am less... I'd be interested in it from Dune, like Frank Herbert's Dune, because I think Frank Herbert did a lot of work to make sure each character had their sort of internal, universe and their own like nuanced perspective. Like, I'd be interested to hear Duke Leto talking about how he thinks of House Harkonnen. It'd be very interesting to hear him give a little TED talk, because I don't know that he would say they're evil through and through, those bastards, I hope they all die, blah, blah, blah. Like, that doesn't feel like Duke Leto Atreides. But then you go to the characters that are introduced in Brian's books, and most of them are like dirty Harkonnens. Ew. And it's like, all right. So, I mean, it's like, do I want to know what Kieran thinks of House Harkonnen? Is Kieran even a character?
I was going to say, Kieran is maybe the only vessel in the show to show that point of view, but obviously, is Kieran even a character is also a valid criticism
it's
of
like
that character.
We'll get a thumbs down emoji from Kieran, and like that's his entire take.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we don't know anything about Kieran either, you know? Is his trauma stemming from the one Tula incident?
Yeah.
How was he raised? His dad is the one survivor that Tula left go, but we get no sense of like what has led Kieran now to this point, to this rebellion where he's willing to blow up an emperor.
Yeah.
To get to a point where you're ready to commit terrorism and murder many people, some of whom might be innocent, because he was going to blow up a whole Landsrod room.
Right.
Not everyone in that room has blood on their hands.
Right.
Kieran Atreides certainly would once he's set the detonator off. So I think, like, I agree with Alphonse to that extent. Like, I wish Kieran had like anything going for him in this season. Maybe that's all being saved for season 2 or something. But like, we got a lot of Harkonnen, and I think that was a strong choice and the right choice given how strong Valia and Tula are as characters. But what little Atreides we get was practically nothing, because it was just Kieran's perspective, which didn't get any more nuance than like, it goes boom.
Big boom. Now, I will say, listening to you talk about it, and also, so Alphonse says, clarification, didn't want a lot more focus, more a 10-minute scene. And I think what would have been really good, and I think that I've convinced myself internally, the hunting scene. I would have loved to see Tula overhear House Atreides talk about House Harkonnen. Now, that only works after the House Atreides reveal, but if she had overheard someone going, blah, 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 House Harkonnen, and she kind of like perks up and goes, oh, are they about to talk shit about my house? And then they were like, it really sucks that they lost their prestige, you know? And like, yeah, Abelard abandoned the fight, but like, do they all need to suffer for that? And then there'd be this moment of her going, wait, holy shit, are we super wrong about all this? Now, again, as much as I think that would be fun and resonant and could give an interesting conversation for her to witness that, them not being having a lot of animosity, it does only work once you know that they are House Atreides, which they held off until they were all dead to tell us. So yeah, I think you're right. Like, the only vessel we really get is Kieran, and Kieran's not a good vessel for just about anything.
Yeah. Well, a quick question that goes hand in hand with Alphonse's observation that we only got 6 episodes, so maybe no time to throw in a Atreides storyline, is a question from Ice Crony. These usernames y'all have always make me laugh. Ice Crony asks, do you think season 2 will have more episodes than season 1?
Yeah, maybe 8. What do you think?
I think it's impossible to say, because that's a business decision made by someone at HBO with a paycheck, or with a checkbook. And I think the reality is that the show will get whatever amount of money the budget allows.
That's a good point. Yeah. Like, if on some level, if they see all of the complaints about it are like, felt rushed, too much, too little, like too few episodes, then maybe a smarter investment is, let's make a longer season next time. But at the same time, if it's like, oh, that was a lukewarm response and let's cancel this series after season 2, they're going to just be like saving as much as they can, lean into some merchandising opportunities, and then like jump ship. So,
yeah. Can you think of a show where the episode numbers changed season to season? I'm trying to think of one, but nothing comes to mind.
I don't know.
Maybe chat.
Off the top of my head.
Chat, can you help us out? Yeah. Are there examples of shows where like...
I mean, the thing is, like, Last of Us, which, again, we don't have season 2 yet, but like, Last of Us changed up episode durations really dramatically. And I've seen that happen. And I think that's kind of along the same lines as like, what does this season need? Or what does this show need? What does this episode need? generally you would say each episode is this long and that's what our budget is and blah, blah, blah. And that's the kind of format that you fit every episode into. And so I think maybe we do have precedent now for people to just say, let's just make it however it is. A lot of anime does that. Like the Attack on Titan had like 6 final seasons. Each one was like, this one was 2 episodes. This one's 19 episodes. This one's 2.5 episodes. And you have to stop halfway through the third.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the creative writing rooms and that sort of situation, from what I know, like it typically is written to be what it is. But for example, like when I used to cover The Witcher on the Witcher podcast, that spin-off show, I forget what it's fucking called now, Blood Origin, I think, was originally budgeted, slated and scripted for 8 episodes. And then somewhere in the production, the budget got cut and they had to take 8 episodes worth of story and cram it into 6. And I mean, that show sucked for that reason, obviously, and a few others.
Yeah.
They like fumbled the bag. They had Michelle Yeoh on that TV show. Like, how'd you fumble that? But I think like there's so many. We're actually going to talk about it in a little bit because I have some quotes from Johan Rank, the director who at one point was going to direct some episodes of this show, and then left. In a recent interview, he basically talked about how like TV production is dramatically different from what he's used to movie production because it's not like one person or a small group's vision. It's like TV is like made by a lot of hands in the pot.
Yeah.
With a lot of opinions and a lot of money and a lot of, and so like he actually doesn't like that environment. Blah, we'll talk about it. But I think a lot of things change and it's hard to answer this question basically.
Yeah. We do have a few people who have said, so like Ale said, Evil had 14 episodes and then 10 in season 3 and 14 in season 4. Yellowstone might have done that, and then season 2 will be it for this show. Oh, that's someone else. Yes, so it does happen sometimes, I guess. Alphonse said Parks and Rec was 6 episodes, went to 24 in season 2. That feels a little bit more like they were testing and piloting versus that was like the intended narrative arc for this grand work of fiction. But nevertheless, yeah, kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, Abu, where maybe it was like they had a plan for 8 to 10 episodes, but then with production craziness and needing to meet deadlines and needing to fulfill contracts, they squeezed it to 6, and that's what we got. Mm-hmm. So Nerd Cookies points out maybe the production chaos of season 1 limited this to 6, and without similar chaos, they'll do 8. I could see that. 8 or 10, you know. I don't necessarily want... like, I wouldn't want this plot stretched over 12 episodes, 12-hour-long episodes. It just doesn't feel like enough. But like 8 or 10 would have given enough time to like really care about some of the characters. So, yeah. Interesting thoughts. As you said, Abu, we don't know. There's no way to know. But yeah, fingers crossed that they make a choice that's good. Hot take.
Yes.
I hope they do good things.
Yeah, wow, cool it. Take another sip of that moonshine.
Back to the moonshine.
You're getting too hot over there. Before we dig into another question, you had another bit about prophecy you wanted to talk about here in our notes.
Yeah. So here's another kind of little thing that I thought was kind of interesting. Avila. Now, we learn a lot about Avila in the final episode. And Avila has an interesting arc just as a character. And this is, again, something that didn't really click for me until I was thinking about the whole series as an entirety. And we basically meet Avila as Valia's spy, right? Like, Avila is the one that Valia trusts to spy on Tula while Valia's gone. Right. And in the final episode, Avila breaks away from Valia. You know, she gives the crowbar to Dorothea. Here's the bonking tool to bonk the thinking machine. But we also learn in the episode 6 flashbacks that Avila watched Valia basically murk all of her like fellow Dorothea followers, presumably her friends, people she cared about and people she liked. They all died because of Valia, and yet she was still able to follow Valia. She was still able to be loyal to Valia. But then it's even more interesting because at that final moment in episode 6, she breaks away from Valia, and you go, okay, you watched her kill all of your friends, and then you were able to follow her, but now you're able to break away from her. And Alay says, was it loyalty or fear? Great point. Could be either. But I do think that there is an internal life to Avila, which kind of hints at she's clearly struggling with some of Valia's choices. But what we see episode after episode is she believes in the sisterhood and she wants the sisterhood to matter and to care and to continue, right? Like so many of her conversations with Tula are, what are you doing? You are in charge of the school. We're losing sisters. We're like, there's an urgency and an anger in her delivery there. She wants the sisterhood to continue. Now, do you think in that moment where Dorothea's back via Lila, she's going, I think Valia and Tula are the best shot this sisterhood has, considering everything she's witnessed over the last 6 episodes. I think it makes perfect sense that she would say, you know what? I believed in Dorothea when she was alive, and right now, Tula and Valia are bad options to lead the sisterhood. I'm going to go within the direction of the sisterhood having the best shot it's got. So I just wanted to kind of talk about Avila for a second, because I think in a show that already had too much going on, it is still nice to see a character like Avila, who is very much a side character, still having a chance to like start in this place, and then we find out she was somewhere else, and now she's in a new place. She's kind of gone on this little journey for herself. I feel like in a very good way, Avila is serving Shuang Yu. Shuang Yu! Bing! Betraying the Mother Superior, but with the continuity of the sisterhood as that kind of guiding North Star. So anyway, wanted to take a moment.
That's an interesting take. I would disagree a little bit and actually agree with Takako's take that Takako says Avila is, to put it not nicely, an opportunist. She was determined to continue living and changed horses when it suited her, herself above all, then the sisterhood. That was my read on Avila. I didn't get that she was deathly loyal to the future of the sisterhood and its mission. And it was more, oh no, I don't want to die, so I will align with whoever I feel is strongest or in charge right now, so that I'm safe.
It's possible, but I do wonder about the nature of Valia's challenge, that if you can follow me, if you can like believe in me and like, you know, as the Mother Superior, then you live. Part of that voice command, the way that the voice works in Brian's universe, I think requires it more than just, I don't want to fucking die. I think other sisters might have had the same feeling, and you're saying, well, she was the only one afraid of death. Of all of those sisters, it's like, I guess, I think that there's, I don't know, room to negotiate in there somewhere.
Yeah, there's certainly room for interpretation there.
Yeah.
Actually, Elaine shouts out Avila. Elaine says, Avila feels like the realist Bene Gesserit in the show to me. Very human, remaining and enduring until she gets the upper hand. She's got potential as a character for sure.
Yeah. I mean, she's got the teeth. She's got the teeth to be a great character. Still one of my favorite comments from Luna with her chompers.
Right.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, no, agreed.
My shiny teeth in me.
I think the longer I've spent thinking about Avila, the more I like her as a character. Mm-hmm. Which is cool.
Well, while we're on characters, there's a question I had highlighted from earlier.
Yeah.
From Gincendiary. Gincendiary said, I cannot wait to see a deepening of Desmond now that he's not a mystery box. Surprise, everything you believe is wrong. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
I think I agree. Desmond is finally someone who can participate in the story rather than just be a mystery in the story. And that opens up a lot of potential for season 2.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting, and again, this is where like, I hope we kind of agree they missed out on an opportunity with Michaela, a really big opportunity to explore some of those themes and some of those conversations that she had. I think that there's a lot of opportunity now to explore, especially because you have Travis Fimmel, who's like such a good actor. Like, give him some really juicy considerations and some like good conversations. Maybe he'll join Tula in the Suspensor prison and he'll just talk to her, and we'll get some like really excellent, you know, Tula, Desmond, both of them excellent actors. Just
there's a lot to work with that relationship.
Oh, totally. That'll be very interesting. It's also totally possible that he'll just be like, no, God. So we'll have to see.
Gola asks, I forget, has the Sisterhood already started the breeding program in this
Yeah.
show? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it, like Raquella, it was Raquella's kind of project of keeping track. And in the books, it's split. They have mentats and they have sister mentats who are helping to organize the data and stuff, but then they're using the thinking machines to project even further out and to keep track of that like huge wealth of data in just a more efficient way. So yeah, they're
Definitely.
they're breeding. They're doing their eugenics.
Elaine with the great takes today also says, moving to Arrakis is a huge move that could really help the storytelling with Michaela.
Yeah, totally true.
Michaela's the only Fremen in the show that we know of. So being on Arrakis would potentially open doors to bring Michaela back in.
She's still alive. She's out there. I would be super, super shocked if they didn't. And it will be interesting to see kind of the Fremen. It's something, again, and I hate that I am now more familiar with some of Brian's books because the Fremen characters in Mentats of Dune and Navigators of Dune are just not, like, it doesn't feel at all like the Fremen. And then you say, well, it's 10,000 years before, but still, I don't know. We're told so much about the Fremen in Frank's books that then when you completely throw all of that out and you say, well, it's early, so it's very different. It's like, yeah, but can it change that much? Or can it change in that direction? Or would it change in that direction? It feels very, very strange. But yes, and to Eli's point, there are still Fremen. There are Fremen already, according to Brian's lore. It's before Fremen and Frank's lore, but, well, it's, yeah. It's before Fremen and Frank's lore. But Brian's lore, there's already Fremen. But they're called Freemen. And right. 10,000 years,
E.
they drop the E. Yeah. Takes a long time to get rid of the E.
It's cleaner. Drop the E.
Yeah, drop the E. It's easier.
You have a couple other notes here. Do you want to keep going through our notes?
Yeah. There's just a kind of nice little moment when Valia decides to fully take over the Sisterhood. She has the problem to solve, which is these followers of Dorothea. And ultimately, it ends up being that she kills most of them, right? But even in doing so, she uses the voice. She uses this superpower she has, and her three friends all know it too. And she goes, we're going to use the voice to basically get rid of the competition. But it is worth noting, and this is something that I thought was resonant, she doesn't just say, kill yourselves. She doesn't just say, fucking leave me alone and don't be a problem for me. The thing that she forces them to do is to make a choice for themselves. And ultimately, it is an ultimatum. So I'm not here giving her a gold star going, you're the best, unblamed, blameless person in the universe. But there is something about, like, her intention was to give them the opportunity, force them into the opportunity of choosing for themselves, which is somewhat redemptive. It's like a little bit like, oh, that is, she's still at the heart of it is having them make a choice and giving them an option for life, even though she could very easily have, just said, hey, everyone slit your throats or whatever. Take out your blade. It's her favorite command. She uses it all the time. This time she could have used it again, but instead, makes them choose instead, which I thought was cool. They just shoes. They all misheard. They were like, "What?
Right? What? My uncreased Jordans? Is that what you're?"
She's like, "What are those?" Damn, Daniel.
Okay, a couple of other comments in the chat that I starred that I want to shout out, or at least quickly comment on. Hainish Mentat says, the religious fervor of Desmond has strong Tleilaxu vibes for me, especially if he's a Gola. And we didn't necessarily see a thinking machine. The Tleilaxu could have sophisticated machines.
Yeah.
I still don't think he's a Gola. I think that's a theory that a lot of fans have thrown out. And I think episode 6 all but confirms that he was saved during the worm attack by a mysterious force behind the scenes. And then the surgery is what saved his life and implanted the thing in his eyeball.
Yeah. Also made him more plot resistant. Like
right. Explosion resistant for sure.
Explosion resistant, strong organs, knife stabbing resistant. Yeah. I think I think they say it's a thinking machine, or they're using forbidden technology or something like that. There's a line where Valia identifies it as a thinking machine.
Yes.
So I think getting into the weeds of like, is it driven by AI? Is it actually thinking? I think in this universe, it's a very clear dichotomy at this point. It's like very obviously a thinking machine, or it's mechanical. It's just like a car that you drive.
Yeah.
Henish Mentat follows up on the thing that I was just saying. I did appreciate the point about Valia making them choose. The command was choose. Interestingly, the Dorothea followers didn't choose, quote, sisterhood above all. They chose better version of the sisterhood over the sisterhood, which is an interesting point, which is true. It's like, hey, I'm the mother superior. This is what's going to define what the sisterhood is. And they go, not my sisterhood. So much so that would even lead to infighting and could jeopardize the sisterhood at all. Like, yeah, that's a good point. It's a savvy business decision from Valia.
Here's another, you know what? This is something that I've been wondering too. Why is Desmond resistant to the voice if he's never had any training? Are we also chalking that up to thinking machine? Surgery? Plot armor?
That's, it just depends on how Brian wants the voice to work. Because even Dorothea, in the scene where Valia has her kill herself, resists the voice, even though this is the third time the voice has ever been used in the galaxy ever, and she didn't know it was a thing, and she is able to resist.
She was completely caught off guard.
She resisted, and it's just I think in Brian's world, it's just kind of like Forza. If you just got a really strong aura, if you're just big dick energy, if you're just like swinging, just flopping around.
You know who's immune to the voice? Pete Davidson.
It'll
never work on
fully immune to the voice. And you're like, how? And he's just like, You're like, what the fuck? Yeah. So that's a good question. I think in lore that'll be interesting to explore. I do kind of suspect it's just the voice is what it needs to be. Similar to someone else said, they're frustrated at how Lila just knew what she needed to know, and Dorothea just knew what she needed to know in order for the final couple episodes to happen. That is also oftentimes how the voice works, and how like Bene Gesserit abilities work. They don't have the ability when they should have the ability, and then they do have it when they probably shouldn't, and it's fun.
Yeah. I also wanted to touch on Arrakis and where the season basically ended. The Thin King asks, so I'm personally not a fan of the move to Arrakis. I realize it's the heart of the original Dune book and what most fans want, but as a super fan, I want to see the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair point.
That's a totally fair point. And I'm right there with you. I think like ending on Arrakis is a great way to tee up a season 2 for people who maybe had that feeling of, I want this to be connected to Denis movies and like, I want to see a familiar place. And I had that feeling of like, oh wow, hey, we're back on Arrakis, cool. But I think the thing that has been most fun about this show is like seeing Wallach 9 and seeing Seleucus Secundus and seeing
I agree.
Seeing Lankavale, like seeing these very distinct places is very cool. And I want to see more of that. So next time, let's see Hagal. Let's see Rachis. Let's see Ix. Why not? As long as you treat it better than the fucking one guy we met from it. Let's see Harmonthep. Let's see.
Sure.
What's the hedonistic planet? Gamont.
You mean my home planet of
Your
Gamont?
home planet of Gamont. Let's see Gamont. Just put all of the sex scenes in one episode. All right, get them out of the way. It'll make it a bonus. Upload it to Pornhub. Dispense of the whatever.
Yeah. I certainly understand. I too, as a super fan, was very excited to be places that aren't Dune in this show. That was somewhat part of the marketing and the promise of this show as well, right? We're going to take you places in the Dune universe you've never been. We're not going to take you back to the sandy planet. And for what it's worth, we didn't go back to the sandy planet for 99% of it until the very last scene. So they kept that promise, and I agree with you. I really liked seeing Wallach 9. I really liked seeing, the set design and the costuming and the visuals were a very strong point for me. I really liked Seleucus Secundus and the palace and all that. But I do think a Dune story, unfortunately, has to be tied to Dune in some way, and there's just like no escaping that in the IP. And I think that's something you can say about Frank as well, right? We kept going back to Arrakis for a majority of Frank's books.
Yeah,
and
true.
we're very deeply tied to that planet and followed characters on that planet for Frank's books. So that it's not something that Frank himself even escaped and expanded from, although he expanded his universe in many ways.
I made the mistake. I completely agree, by the way. And I think like the core of Frank's universe is that Arrakis is very important. So like we're going to go back to it for sure. I made the mistake of scrolling. This is so mean to say on the podcast, but it was a meme from someone, which is in our meme channel, because I have one of the memes pulled up as like the meme of the week that I thought was so funny. Mm-hmm. But someone posted on December 29th, House Zedong posted, "We taught this chimpanzee to understand the Brian Herbert Dune prequels and he hanged himself." That's so funny to me.
God.
That's really dark.
That's dark.
That's really funny, though. I think we all now understand what people have felt over the last 20 years as Brian continues to release books. It's like, read them and feel like this is not my Dune, or just like miss out on new Dune stuff. And Abu, I feel like we are slowly whittling down. We're like a rock in a tumultuous sea. We are being eroded, and one day we will be like,
yes.
I don't know.
Something I don't recommend doing is reading a Brian book and a Frank Herbert book at the same time, which I'm currently doing. In preparation for a future episode.
Yeah,
and
that's rough.
My God, don't do that.
Bold choice.
Okay, we have a couple other points you wanted to hit on in our notes, and then I do want to chat about some of our pre-prepared questions as well. So do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I'll get through this one quickly. This is the last point that I want to bring up, which is this conversation about like puppets versus puppeteers. Or another way to think about it would be like, who are the free agents and who are the people like actively doing things for the series? And the first like 3 or 4 episodes, it is such a Valia versus Desmond game. It is Valia moving her pieces, everyone who has to do it exactly as she says, and Desmond doing the same. He's basically calling every shot. He says, I'm loyal to the Emperor or the Empire, and he basically otherwise just does the fuck he wants, and people have to deal with it. And those are the two like main actors. But by the end of the series, right, like we have these two 5D chess players facing off. By the end of the series, we learn first, over many episodes, that Valia is clearly driven by revenge and anger and not exactly in as much of a like strategic mindset as we would have thought initially. She also, we learn in the final episode, she has been ruled by fear and has had this like deep gripping fear since Griffin's death, and the fact that, did I kill Griffin? Am I at fault? All of that is in her character. We also learned that Desmond is a puppet turned into a machine weapon guy and manipulated by that evil silhouette. So I think this overall like switch up of the very beginning of the series and the final episodes, where they basically you realize that they are not necessarily as free as they might have seemed in the first episodes, makes Valia's conversation with Tula. First, it makes Valia's conversation with Tula that much more impactful, because at the end of the series, Valia says, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not like ruled by my fear. The fear isn't there for her. She's leveled up. And that is a very satisfying character arc to have Valia go on. To realize, oh, I'm actually not as in control as I thought I was. I am beholden to this feeling that I have. And then to be free of that, what a great way to end a series or a season, right? And then Desmond...
We should write like a poem of bravery about it.
Yeah, fortune cookie of really not giving a shit. New title, yeah. Meanwhile, Desmond overheard their conversation. So to someone's point earlier, he now has this information to potentially cut his own puppet strings in season 2, and that's been very cool to see as well, where we have this, like, we see the world in one way, we realize by the end it's been a completely different way, but now the pieces are set up for a very interesting season 2.
Yeah, and it's always satisfying to break down and humanize what at first glance might appear as a legendary figure.
Yeah.
Or even on a smaller sense, someone who's in charge and has their shit together.
Yeah.
It is a fun storytelling device to peel back the layers of that character and be like, there's more here than you thought, and they're maybe not as put together as you thought, and not as in charge as you thought. Because that's something that's deeply relatable as a fellow human being who is not as put together as it may appear, or, is not as on top of his laundry as he should be.
Yeah.
I can look at Valia and go, you know what? She makes the same mistakes I do. I get it.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I think some of my favorite art is that art that reminds us that we're not alone and that a lot of people have the same human experience. And that's a good opportunity for art to kind of remind us that we're not alone. It's great.
Right. Okay. I've starred a couple of other questions. Some of these I think we can, some of these are just logistical questions. Have we been saying this name?
I said Alej or Alej.
Alej or Alej asks, is the Discord open to the public? It is not. If you sign up to be a patron, then you get access to the Discord. Sphinxy asks, did anyone call you guys yet to consult about season 2? No.
Not yet, but we are open to it.
Yes, fingers crossed. But also we're just 2 podcasters.
Yeah.
And so it would actually be quite absurd to call us to work on a multi-million-dollar show.
Also, we keep shit talking Brian Herbert, and he's an executive producer of the show. So that
very very unlikely. But I appreciate all of you who think that that's actually likely. Gives me hope. Eli says, ironically, on my second watch through, where I got the foreshadowing and more of the themes, I like prophecy a bit more. Will you be doing another watch through, Leo?
At some point, yeah. I think I'll definitely do it leading up to season 2. I also think it would be fun to do like we did for the first movie leading up to the second movie. It'd be fun to do a watch along commentary of it.
Yeah.
And just like
that would be a 6-hour long. We're not doing 6 episodes. We're just one 6-hour long episode. You have to binge the whole thing in one sitting. No intermission, no potty breaks. You and me on mic for 6 straight hours,
get
nonstop,
a catheter.
just mainlining.
If you're
Dune
weak
prophecy.
enough, if it's so weak you need a break. Not this show, not this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure before season 2 we will revisit it in some capacity. Yeah. So it will be fun to look back on it like a year down the line.
Yeah, totally,
and see if our feelings are any different. Zeptagus throwing out some fun ideas. Wouldn't it have been cool if each season time skipped thousands of years until the series caught up with the original Dune?
That would be cool. Very, very Foundation-like, where the through line is this kind of broader meta-narrative. It'd be cool.
That would be cool. I worry that it wouldn't be successful. Foundation, actually, when they adapted it, I was listening to an interview with David S. Goyer, the creator of that show, and he was talking about this very problem because the Foundation book does skip like decades, centuries in between the different parts. And we talked about this on our Foundation conversation, Leo, on the episodes we did. But like, it's consistent ideas, not consistent characters. Like a character that's introduced in these 3 chapters just doesn't come up again because we've time skipped 500 years in the future suddenly. And that, I think, is harder to sell in television, where things have to be a bit more character-driven. I think in a novel, you can be a bit more idea-driven. And David S. Goyer talked about that too, where they basically they were like, we can't do the time skip thing. We have to figure out a different way to tell this, to adapt this book into a TV show.
Yeah. Anthology series, as Alex says. And apparently we can say Alex. So cool. Thank you, Alex, for that correction.
Yes. Zeptagus says, same with 3-Body Problem. Exactly. The 3-Body Problem book is very idea-driven with weaker characters, and the Netflix adaptation had to make up characters that weren't in the book in order to tell a more character-driven story.
And it was so good.
Yeah, I mean, the adaptation had its faults for sure.
I'll really quick question that I got, and we can't put this up because we didn't pre-prepare it, but a good question about Dune Prophecy. Someone emailed us on December 25th saying, at first I thought we were in a pre-Mentats thing, like pre-Mentats universe, but suddenly a few episodes into the show, we get a name drop, and it just makes me ask, where are the Mentats, basically? And where are the Mentats is such an interesting question that I'm sure season 2 will somewhat address, because the idea of the Mentat school, which is happening right now in the same timeline, like somewhere there's, Gilbertus Albans teaching his Mentat students and watching some of them get eaten by swamp dragons, and like all it's like it is happening, and they're just not as present. And there are moments when you have characters going, man, I should get a Mentat, and not everybody has them yet. So we're not to the point where Mentats are everywhere, working for every great house. We're not there yet, but the Mentats are being trained, which is, great.
Yeah. I did want to, we're almost at time here. So if you have thoughts and questions, folks, drop them in chat. I did want to touch on, I think actually shouts to Elaine, because Elaine did a video on this and I watched it and it was very interesting. But there was an interview with Johan Rank. I think that's how you say his name. Apologies if that's not how you say his name. But in the playlist, Johan was interviewed about some other projects that he's working on, but they also asked him about Dune Prophecy. And the writer asked him about Dune Prophecy, didn't get a whole lot, but did say this. So the writer was Rodrigo Perez, and he said, I tried to get the story out of Rank, but to hear it from him, the situation wasn't so much drama, but par for the course of how TV filmmaking goes sometimes. And he's talking about the production issues that Dune Prophecy had, the things that we've covered on this show a number of times. Actors coming and going, showrunners coming and going, title changes. At once it was called Dune Sisterhood, now it's Dune Prophecy, creative changes, etc. Johan Rank was one of the directors who was meant to direct the first episode, maybe also the second. Creative differences, he left the project. So he didn't spill a lot of tea in this interview, and he made it sound like, well, this is just how TV kind of goes. It's messy, there's back and forth, there's up and down, there's changes all the time before a TV show finally gets to production. But there are a couple of quotes from Johan himself that I thought were worth sharing. And these are just select parts of quotes. This is not one complete quote, to be clear. Johan said, at one point, the original idea of the story completely changed course. That makes a lot of sense, given the production changes. It changed names and became a completely different thing. He's talking about Sisterhood to Prophecy. Again, that's something that can happen in episodic TV. So he's kind of brushing it up to like, this is the process. This is just the creative process of making television. He went on to also say, personally about himself, TV doesn't fulfill me as much as I need it to, because I don't like doing something and then walking away from it, because that allows other people to then go in and start turning it into what they want. And that makes sense as a director, like if he sets the vision in episode 1 and 2, that still leaves 3, 4, 5, 6 for other directors to come in. And, TV shows usually have a Bible, and it's the showrunner's job to keep things consistent across different directors, across different episodes. But everyone has a different creative touch, and they'll bring their own creative DNA to a project. And I think that's just something that Johan Rank didn't like. TV's not for him, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I had a long conversation with someone because I'm learning about game development right now. And we were talking about comparing like oil painting to making a video game and like what commonalities there are and what differences there are. And one of the things that came to mind was like most video games are collaborative, and that just changes the whole nature of art. Like when you rely on a team, when it's a village making a thing, it's going to be a different process. And for sure, if you're directing and your name is attached to a product, to have much less say in the final product, I can imagine that being not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
Really quick comment from Pizza Party Weekend. Why no mention of Orion Atreides in the TV show? He's a huge part of the Schools of Dune trilogy. He is mentioned like 3 times, and then it doesn't show up. And part of me thinks
appearance.
doesn't show up because, again, focusing on the Sisterhood and his plot, although it is motivating for Griffin, is not necessarily that really wrapped up in Sisterhood junk in the Schools trilogy. And then the other thing is him showing up, I think, the lay people would be very confused by like, okay, this guy's 250 years old and why is he a 30-year-old? Like, why is he in his mid-30s? And then you have to explain, well, he had a life extension surgery that made him live forever. And you go, what? But
right.
Who did that? Anyway.
Yeah, he's a very confusing character. Like, I'm reading Sisterhood of Dune. You have read the Houses trilogy. And so much of Vorian, who's a major character and gets a lot of fucking boring-ass chapters in the book, depends on you having read the other prequel books written by Brian and Kevin that are all about the Butlerian Jihad, and there's all these like references to the League of so-and-so and his dad Agamemnon and some drama there, and it's just like he's a very confusing character even in the book when you don't have that context. And so I think in the TV show to try and introduce that would be kind of an impossible task. Plus the TV show kind of takes place after all of that, so like, what is Vorian up to post that trilogy?
Well, not post the trilogy.
Is it a huge spoiler to say?
And I don't know what he's up to after that. Maybe he dies. I don't know.
Yeah, what the fuck happens to him?
But in like Mentats in Navigators, he's still putting around.
He's still around? Okay.
Because even at the time of this trilogy, when Tula kills Ori, that all happens, and Vorian is in the village when that happens. And then he basically goes off with Ori's brother to hunt down Tula because she leaves a note that says, I'm going to keep hunting down Atreides until the day I die. So he and Willem go off to like find her, but then basically go to Lankavale and show up and actually like talk to Valia's parents, and they're like, we haven't seen Tula in a while, she's somewhere else. And then you learn that Tula's pregnant with Ori's kid. So Vorian is around, and he does interact with some of the characters that we've seen.
Yeah.
He's still boring and weird.
Yeah, that's the thing. And it's like, it's a kind of a confusing, because this show takes place after the Schools trilogy, after those three books, timeline-wise, right? Am I correct in that?
Say that again.
Prophecy takes place after Navigators, right? Like after the trilogy of books, technically on the timeline.
Oh, it depends on what else is going on in the universe.
Jesus Christ. Okay, so yeah, Vorian is like question mark.
Yeah.
Omni Collective, I will say I agree with this. Omni Collective says, if I was making shows, that would be something that's not my cup of tea, where the final product doesn't match my vision, which was the Johan Rank thing I was talking about earlier, which I kind of agree with. You know, I find that the most powerful art that I consume is a singular person's vision. You know, obviously collaborators are necessary, but there is a detriment to too many hands in the kitchen. What's the phrase? Whatever that phrase is. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Hands.
Too many hands in the kitchen.
Just those hands from Spy Family, or not Spy Family, Spy Kids. Those hand people. I agree. And as a bit of a control freak myself, I understand the instinct to be like, I'm making just the first 2 episodes of this show that's going to have my name on it and my imprint on it, but then you get to make the rest?
Yeah.
Fuck that.
I mean, a lot of like, this artist is no longer questioned, and it's like their fingerprints are all over the whole work, can be very, very good. But it's also like leads to not good things too. Like I can't help but think about Death Stranding, where the game. Have you played Death Stranding?
I love Death Stranding.
Okay, but the ending fucking pisses me off so much.
The hour-long credit sequence that's unskippable.
The unskippable. So I was playing it live on Twitch.
Look, one person's vision, okay?
That's what I'm fucking saying. Someone needed to be like Kojima, buddy, pal, friend, comrade. The thing is, I was playing it like live on Twitch, and I was like, oh, what a great game. That was very fun. Loved this game. What a good game. And then someone in chat was like, you have 3 hours left. And I was like, there's no fucking way. There's no. And then, yeah, unskippable hour and a half, hour long cuts of.
It was wild.
And then you have like a boss
and then there's
battle
more
and walking and
game
shit.
to play.
And it's like, what the fuck is happening? You needed someone in the room to be like, guy, let's tone this back.
This, I agree wholeheartedly, Leo. Everyone also needs a strong editor.
Yes.
But an editor's job is not to create the vision.
Yes,
the editor's
true.
job is to help hone and craft and provide outside feedback.
1,000%.
But I think the vision has to come from one source, and that's where I believe the strongest works are created. And so
that's a great point.
Kojima. I feel like would you go up to Kojima and critique him? Because I certainly would be like scared too. But he could use an editor.
He's such an unserious person, though. Did you see that?
That's so true.
Did you see that tweet where it was like someone said, he said it was an honor voicing the character Kojima in this like video game. This like, and someone said, "Are you going to be reprising the role ever?" And he said, "No." It's like it's an honor to voice Kojima. So I was like, "Oh, are you going to do that again?"
Yeah.
No.
Right. But I think very. Now we're like way off topic, but like Miyazaki is a notoriously difficult person to work with from what I've read and heard, because he is so like, this is my vision, this is the singular vision.
Yeah, he was like storyboarding his whole fucking movies. He's like, here's my 600 pages, don't touch it.
Don't touch it, don't change a thing. And that's how Mad Max Fury Road kind of came together too. It was like a chaotic and awful production where Tom Hardy notoriously had the worst time of his life. Because of the way it was filmed, it was like one singular vision and storyboarded in this chaotic, crazy way. But obviously that vision came together, and like that's kind of art. You can't make it alone, and you need other people, but too many other people also dilutes it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Alas. Now we're talking about Metal Gear in the chat, so we've pivoted. I think that's a good note to end on, perhaps.
I will just toss in two quick comments.
Okay.
It just says as kind of parting gifts, because I thought this was really lovely. Reddit user Elite Alice says, quote, "For all Valia's planning, human emotions seem to be the one thing she's consistently overlooked. Whether it's Tula falling in love with Atreides and having a kid, Yanez with the Atreides swordmaster, Tula with Desmond, etc., no matter how strong a thinking machine is, it can't trump the human heart." End quote. Which I thought was a beautiful takeaway, and sure, agreed. So, good job, Alita Alice. I liked that. The foil to Valia's planning is people having attachments, and she didn't even mention Francesca, loving
Havik.
Yeah, and it is very Bene Gesserit ever to
Eli's point. Very Bene Gesserit.
And again, that is very within Dune's themes of seeing love and affection as weakness, and then that ultimately being actually quite.
Okay, let's wrap this stream up there. Thank you all so much for hanging out and for having such a great time with us. These are always so much fun. And again, this is the last Prophecy live stream that we're going to do, but I think this has been a really fun experiment for us.
Totally.
We haven't regularly streamed on Gom Jabbar in the past, but I think we will start to do so now. It's not going to be every week because that's just like crazy for our schedules, and we have other episodes in production to work on. But we will announce streams well in advance so that you can try and make time and participate. And I think we're going to continue to do this. So let us know what kinds of streams you would want. We already have some ideas on what we want to do. But of course, if you have ideas, let us know as well. You can join the Discord. You can email us, all that good stuff.
I want to do Dune Awakening streams. Be so much fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a little bit of outro here. Before we let you go, dear listeners, we want to remind you of some ways to support the show and to keep in touch with us. And the two best ways, as always, is one, to become a patron over at patreon.com/GomJabbar, and to get yourself some Dune-themed swag stuff related to this thing we all like at our merch store, GomJabbarShop.com. Those links are in the show notes. You can find them. Also, we have them on the screen because we are fancy. We're fancy.
Hell yes. And, of course, we love to hear from you. So reach out to us, gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. Someone earlier in the chat was like, I pitched you my entire idea for a TV show. Did you read it? Yes, I read the whole thing over the holidays, okay? It was a really long email, and I didn't respond because it's daunting to respond to something like that. But I did read it. So we look at the emails. We're very behind. we'll catch up on them eventually. comfortbarpodcast@gmail.com is the place to reach out and say hello, share your ideas, thoughts, and cute pictures of your pets. Of course, another quick reminder that if you don't have the means to become a monthly supporter on Patreon at the moment, you can always send us a one-time tip. That link is on the screen as well. Buy Me a Coffee is a great place to just send us a tip of any size. Any bit helps, and continues to keep the show running, keeps the gears turning.
True. Zaptasia says live drinking games. And actually, along those lines, I've never talked about these, but I actually have. This is from a company called Adroit Theory, and it is this is a Fedaykin Edition Imperial IPA. And these are sandworms with some Fedaykin Fremen samurai warriors on the cans. And there's like 3 or 4 different ones, and I have a couple in the fridge that I've been intending to like drink and talk about on camera at some point for like 2 years, and now I'm wondering if beers go bad.
2 years? It has been a while.
Yeah, and you have them somewhere. I think I gave you like 2.
I don't have them, Chad. I don't know where they are.
He lost the gift I gave him. Oh my god. You still have the Stilgar card though, right?
Oh yeah, it's here in the studio somewhere. It's not in the shot. It's like over there or something. Okay, gang, thanks so much for hanging out. We have another episode to go record because we're back on the grind. Episodes will start coming back out next week on the podcast feed, so we will see you then. And we'll see you all on Discord, and thanks so much. We love you all. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Banks.